Okay, in the last segment we saw how we can translate from one language to the other using an encoder and a decoder, both are RNNs, right. Have you noticed how we are really progressing? I have been talking about this every time, when we take up a new topic in the natural language processing. It is very similar to what you probably would have noticed in the Bloom's taxonomy. I spoke about this in the beginning of the course. In the Bloom's taxonomy, there are about 6 levels. It would be like a pyramid, and then in the pyramid what you will first have is remember. That is, when you are taught something, you remember that, and then you would be able to recall that what you have been told, right. So, it is like the search operation that we have in the Bing search or Google search or any other search engine. Just given a word, the system knows what it should find out based on the input word that you have given. So, we can equate that to our search operations, right. So, without really understanding what is the meaning of the word that you are inputting, the search operation, the basic search operation I am talking about in the early search engine days, which recovers the information related to what you have input as the query data, right, or it is a simple retrieval operation. Okay. Then next is about understanding. So, this is so from here we want to move to the next level of what you are really inputting, right. So, in the search, if it is a very blind search based on the keyword, you won't really like it. That is how it was in the beginning of the search engine days. And then later, every word that you are inputting, for example, if you say use a word buy or use bought. So, both are taken to be as one word, even if this is not found in the text document. So, it will still bring document that contain the word buy, even if you had input bought into that, right. So, it tries to understand what you are really doing. So, some of the search engines started adopting that, and then there came the understanding aspect of that. It tries to understand what is the kind of keyword that you are inputting, and then tries to find the equivalent of that, even if the same keywords are not found in the document, it still retrieves. Okay. So, then this is the next level, trying to understand the query itself. And then third one would be your application, right. Application, or you call it as apply. Whatever knowledge that you have gained by reading through it, by understanding some of the syntax of that or the meaning of that, you try to apply to a different scenario. So, this is where our word embedding started. So, we understand the query, we understand what the meaning of that word to some extent, and then word embedding, what it does is, even though it is not exactly finding out the meaning of the word that are found in the query, it tries to figure out what are the neighborhood words that it would have seen in the earlier training days, right. So, for example, if you train the neural network with a huge collection of English documents, it tries to understand the meaning of the words. We have seen that in our word embedding classes and so on, right. So, it tries to understand the neighborhood words, not exactly the meaning of the word, but it tries to understand what could be the possible next word if I give the first two words and so on. And also it relates certain combinations of words and then give you that. So, to give you an example, so if you search for automobile, word embedding based searches would provide details related to dealers, workshops, maybe old car dealers, and so on and so forth. Anything related to that, it finds as its neighborhood that came as part of the word embedding, right. So, we can relate to some extent Bloom's taxonomy to the word embedding at the third level. And then if you go to the next one, which is the analysis part of that, I would say that these two are somewhat combined in the word embedding. Okay. So, it tries to really analyze what should be the next. For example, in the language modeling, right. So, it read all the documents belonging to a corpus and then tried to find out what could be the next word, right. It is a prediction type. So, for that it does a lot of analysis as part of the training process, right. So, we can relate the Bloom's taxonomy of analysis to both language modeling as well as word embedding there. And then the last one I am going to be combining that as creative part. So, instead of using evaluation and creation, I am going to combine both as one. Okay. So, this is where I think we have the machine translation part. The creative part is about writing your own sentences, ideas, and then based on what you have learned in the process. So, machine translation we can closely say that it is trying to be very creative when the system has learned the translations based on the parallel corpora. It is given a new sentence, it is now going to be creating a sentence for you, which is a creative process. Okay. So, this is where machine translation and then summarize a huge document into few sentences. So, those aspects come into that. This is basically a creative aspect. So, we are slowly taking the machine from the basic remembering aspect to the creative aspect through the machine learning algorithm. Okay. So, this is a very small comparison that I thought we should make in the machine learning idea. So, this is a very simple comparison we probably should make. Okay. So, by understanding the Bloom's taxonomy level, for example, now we can rate the machine also whether it is doing the job of just recalling the values, or it understands what you have provided and then gives you the meaningful output for you, or it is able to apply certain knowledge it has captured by going through the documents and then give you some results out of that. Okay. So, some more level of intelligence we have given to the machine. And then later in terms of language modeling, it tries to predict the next word based on what it has seen earlier. It is similar to the analysis aspect, maybe as a small thin or a thin boundary between the creative and the analysis side. But the creative is very clear with respect to machine translation and summarize. So, it is able to do something which human were doing earlier, right. So, it is a very creative process, and then it also creates a lot of possible translations, and many of them may not really be a good one, but out of which you can pick and choose some of the good translation that are coming out of it. So, the machine translation part that we have been talking about has reached a stage, it may not be very creative like human, but at least it is able to replicate about 5 to 10% rather 5 to 10% of humans in this aspect. Okay. So, this is one thing that I thought you should know, right. And for your information, Bloom's taxonomy you used in many of the examinations where they try to provide questions based on the pyramid. You know, there will be some questions in terms of identifying your creativity. There will be some question that will try to understand how are you analyzing certain elements based on the data that is given to you, and then how do you really apply the knowledge that you have gathered. So, there will be some questions on that, and then there will be some recall question that probably you would know very well, right. So, many of the exams follow this pattern. So, I thought it's a good idea to compare how machines also learn and then where we are really taking the machines to with respect to this.